righty. And we are live. Welcome, everyone. Look at that. Bang on the hour. Bang on time. How about that? Welcome, everyone, to NFA Live, Not Financial Advice Live. This is episode number 6, if I remember rightly. We are back to our usual Thursday slot. It's me hosting here on Coin Bureau Clips, and I am, of course, joined by the wonderful Mr. Ben Cowan from Into the Cryptoverse.
How's it
Hello,
going?
Ben. And by the equally wonderful Mr. Rob Wolf from Digital Asset News. Hello,
Hello,
Rob.
everybody.
Thanks for joining us today, gents.
Oh, yeah. Good to be here.
Glad to be here.
It's been another week of mostly green candles in the charts. I noticed, I was looking today, we've seen a bit of a downturn today, although I noticed that it's kind of up on the hourly, which I can only assume is in anticipation of this show starting. That's the best.
Of course, yeah.
That's the best reason I can think of. Ben, you're also getting some very positive feedback in the comments about the hair as well.
Yeah,
it
does help show where the price is going. You know, like the double peaks in 2021.
Something I used to look out for on live streams as well is where everyone's joining from, and we've got a nice international audience today. People joining from Serbia and Germany and the UK and America, all these sorts of places. So we're truly international today, which is great. Shall we just dive right into the questions? Can I also say to everyone watching as well, I forgot to do this last time I hosted, but if you have some questions for Ben, Rob, and myself, then if you can leave them in the comments, and I will do my very best to ask some of them out loud at the end. We'll try and answer a few questions at the end, if that's okay. In the meantime, let's crack on. We're going to talk about a few things today. We are going to talk about the Fed as well, again, because Jerome Powell has been out in the wild again this week. And I think it's had an interesting effect on the markets. We're also going to be looking out for some bullish factors. We're going to talk about social sentiment a bit, and we've got a couple of more sort of whimsical questions towards the end. So I hope you can stick around. Anyhow, guys, let's jump straight on in. One thing I've been thinking over the last week or so is what the heck is going on with the Fed? I mean, it seems to me that markets are kind of letting Chairman Powell speak, listening to him, and then just completely disregarding everything he says. So what I was wondering was, do you feel that the Fed's credibility has been kind of dented by this transitory inflation narrative that's come back to haunt them a little bit, or do you think it's more that investors just kind of feel the Fed is kind of managing expectations and they're not really paying too much attention? What do you think it is? What are your kind of thoughts on what we're seeing with Jerome and co at the moment? Ben, do you want to lead us off?
Sure. So we've sort of talked about this scenario for a number of weeks now, and essentially I think we're in this sort of transitionary phase where I wouldn't say the Fed, I mean, yes, they did lose some credibility, I think, with the whole inflation is transitory argument from, way back when, but I think there's some element of, interest rates are already relatively high. We have inflation coming back down. And while there are signs that the economy is slowing down and demand is slowing down in some sectors, you're not really seeing the economy deteriorate in the way that I think a lot of people were thinking it was going to just a few months ago, at least not yet, right? At least not yet. And so I still think we're just in this transitionary phase where, inflation's coming down. The Fed is, yes, they're still raising interest rates, but the majority of the rate hikes are behind us. So until something changes, I think that's sort of where we are right now, until something changes. So either if inflation reaccelerates, or we see, because if inflation accelerates again, then that essentially would probably mean that the market is still underpricing the terminal rate, and I think that would be relatively that would not be a great thing if yields were to go higher. It's not usually a great thing for risk assets. So if inflation continues to come down, or until inflation goes back up to the upside, or you see, the labor market soften to a material degree, I still think we're in this transitionary phase where it's like, it sort of seems like things could get worse, but because they're not worse yet, risk assets are just sort of turning a blind eye. And we actually, if you look back in history, when we have things like the inversion of the yield curve and that sort of stuff, it's always, it can typically be a time where, again, a transitionary phase. It's sort of before a recession, and risk assets can rally in those phases. So I think that's where we are. I think the Fed's honestly doing a pretty good job at this point, all things considered. I think that 25 basis points was likely the right move at the last meeting. I know some people, I used to think 50 was probably more appealing, but I think that they're probably doing the right thing to just sort of slow it down to 25 basis points for a few months and just kind of see what happens, because we still don't know the full effects of all the rate hikes from last year. We've talked about how it takes about 12 months for the effects to be felt. And so, I mean, they didn't even start hiking rates in 2022 until like March, I think it was. So we're not even a full year into the rate hikes yet. So I think that still remains to be seen. So yeah, my general thinking right now is that, we're just in a year where risk assets in general are going to chop up for a while, right? And I mean, looking at crypto, it's all about, you have your bear market year, you have your recovery year, and then you have your up year. So again, recovery year right now, choppy for a while. And I think as investors, we're likely just going to be chasing whatever the new narrative is, right? Right now it's inflation's down and the labor market is strong. We'll see where the CPI reports continue to come in and how the labor market continues to evolve.
Absolutely. Rob, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of bummed out, quite honestly. I thought I'll be honest with everybody. I was hoping, and this is bad to say, but I was kind of hoping for more of a dip in all markets because, of course, nobody really gets rich in the ascending patterns of a bull market. Everybody starts to accumulate as things start to go down, at least, the ones that actually see the trends. So I was kind of hoping that things would go down. I'm not saying that they can't go down, but here we are. And I think this is the most critical time or important time for investors, because we were talking about this before we started, which is apathy, and everything starts chopping sideways and you hear two different narratives and it's not really going up tremendously like blow off tops, and it's not, crashing down. So people are just moving sideways and it gets kind of boring. And then when it gets kind of boring, people are like, I don't really want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. And they go to the next narrative, whatever it is. But I mean, to answer your question, there was a comment. It was on you said it, Guy, on your clip show, or no, on the regular channel. It was the quote from Chairman Powell: "The risk of doing too little is greater than the risk of doing too much." So I don't know why that's the markets just say, he's not going to keep doing it, but I mean, he is going to keep doing it. And they're actually, and agree with Ben, they are doing a pretty good job. I mean, honestly, the year-over-year inflation's gone down, core inflation's gone down. Houses and homes, looks like they're kind of cooling off. M2 money supply is going down. You've got quarterly earnings are cooling as well. It's just, there's a couple of things that concern us, which is the unemployment rate. It's gone down, heavily, which we'd not like to see, even though it sucks because people are losing their jobs. But maybe it's because this was talked about yesterday on the show because people are going back to, their job markets in-house instead of working from the home. And then another thing that I saw, which was concerning, is that we just hit an all-time high of credit card debt, almost $1 trillion here in the United States, $930 billion. So if we take a look at those things, who really knows? And maybe there was this term, I don't know if you guys have heard this, a rolling recession.
I haven't heard that term. No.
Yeah, so I was just doing some research for today's show, and they talked about how things can be in a rolling recession, and a couple of economists that said how the models are kind of not broke, but a little bit different this time. And they said how a rolling recession, it'll affect certain sectors first and then kind of roll over to the next sector. So you'll have like manufacturing and housing and then service and then something else, and it kind of goes through. But you'll still hit a recession, but it doesn't affect that as hard. I don't know if that's what's happening or if it's different, but I mean, in all honesty, it's anybody's guess. That's why I'm just dollar cost averaging.
Yeah, it ties into that "don't fight the Fed" narrative, doesn't it? It's so hard to make any sort of judgment call about where things might be heading. The Fed seems to have been fairly outspoken about what their plans are. And yet we still have markets acting kind of quite irrationally as well. I think there's also a sense that, I mean, how bothered is the Fed about markets, really? I mean, the Fed has its dual mandate, 2% inflation, 4% unemployment. So it's gonna stick to that, I imagine, because otherwise, I mean, unless sort of depressed stock prices, things like that are going to pose a risk to financial stability in the United States, I think the Fed seems fairly set on just pursuing that dual mandate fairly single-mindedly. Is that fair to say, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as long as there's no deterioration of the financial conditions, like you mentioned, I think they're quite happy. And I mean, if you think about what the S&P, the S&P, the major, one of the major indices, what the S&P has done, it's essentially just gone sideways since May of 2022, or even earlier than that. If you just sort of look at it like this range-bound thing. So I think that's actually ideal for the Fed right now. Is that the market is sort of just continuing to chop around. If it gets pretty bad, that could put the Fed in a tough situation, because what do they do if financial conditions deteriorate and inflation is still high, and wage inflation is still going up? That would put them in a very tight, a very difficult spot. So I think they probably are fine with financial conditions at the moment.
Yeah. And I will say this: it's amazing, because like when we started to talk about this, back in March and April last year, when the Fed was raising rates, I didn't think we thought it would go this. I mean, so far it's been well. Who knows what's going to happen in the next 4 or 5 months? But like Ben said, I mean, honestly, they're actually doing a pretty good job. And I was so far, I thought there's no way we're going to do a soft landing. And it looks like maybe we could pull one of these out. Amazing if it actually happens. And I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it's amazing that it is. And of course, this is one more thing I'll be wrong on.
No, I think you're right, Rob. I mean, it's impossible to call, isn't it? But there does seem like the possibility of a soft landing has certainly grown immensely since this time last year. I mean, I think people were, the idea that the Fed would have even the slightest chance of pulling something like this off, I think was pretty fanciful to most people, given the economic conditions, given what we could see in front of us. But yeah, they have done a good job, and I think in a way Jerome and co, they've played it quite well, but by just almost kind of playing dumb, really, and just sort of managing this managed decline in prices, rather than try and shock the system, do anything too aggressive. They've been straightforward about what they want to do and what they plan to do. They've gradually tailed off these rate hikes, and I mean, heck, it seems to be working, doesn't it? Inflation is going down. The system hasn't broken yet, and I mean, I think I noticed earlier today when I was looking at things. I mean, the housing market in the US still seems to be holding up as well. There were lots of concerns around that not so long ago, but yeah, dare I say it, the Fed does seem to be doing its job pretty well, as you said, Rob.
Yeah. We'll see how it works out. I don't know. Hopefully it works.
I think just to remember though, like, it's hard because we're not saying that you have to have a hard landing, but the path to a hard landing always goes through the phase where people think we're going to get a soft landing. So I think we always have to be just sort of aware of that. and have an open mind that until we fully see the effects of the rate hikes from last year, it might be premature to sort of celebrate a soft landing, so to speak.
Or just go all in and go, you know what, this is it. Right. The bull market's coming. I got to start selling my house and just go all in. That is the mentality of disaster.
But what's funny is this always happens. Like if you think to 2015 and 2019, we always front run it, right? The market always front runs it. And then at some point later on in the year, we then just come right back down to sort of, come back down to the lows. This happens every single time. It's kind of funny how it's funny how cyclical it is,
Yeah. Well, there we are, guys. Don't let irrational exuberance get the better of you. Don't put that champagne on ice just yet, because we're only in February. We've got a long way to go yet, but certainly there are positive signs out there, I think, as well as lots of things to be concerned about, which kind of leads me on to very neatly to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which was just sort of bullish factors in general. I know we've been a little bit bearish on this show in the past, and I think with good reason. But that said, the markets certainly in the last couple of weeks or so have been anything but. So I wanted to look at some bullish factors as well. So my question is, what bullish factors should we be looking out for? The bear market thesis is kind of strong right now, but I think there are certainly things out there that could invalidate that. So Rob, is there any particular bullish factor that you're watching out for in particular?
First of all, I didn't think this was sustainable. I didn't think this little mini bull run that we have, but of course here we are. But if we take a look at, if we can define what we would think as bullish sentiment or a bull market, we take a look at it's 20% drop consecutively, and then with a 20% raise over time. And then the sentiment of the market has increased for a little bit if we take a look at the fear and greed index. So if we take a look at that and say, well, 20% drop, this is just in traditional markets, not in crypto, is no really defining factor. But we've had quite a drop over the last year or so. I think Bitcoin is down 77, 78%, something like that. The overall market cap is down even lower than that, or at least over 60%. And then in the last 60 days, haven't we gone up more than 20%, 30, 42, somewhere around there? I can't remember. So if we take a look at those factors, then just take a look at the fear and greed index of today, which I just checked Ben's website. I just steal from it all the time. And fear and greed index is at 55. So that's classification as of greed. So right now, even though we got hit pretty hard in 2022, people are they're feeling it. They're feeling like this is the bull market. The problem is, and we just talked about this, is that people think this is sustainable and we hit a line, especially the ones that, the people that are watching this stream, they're not new to this game. But if you are new and you just got in like 2021, 2022, you have to understand nothing goes straight up. It'll be rocky. We'll see dips and valleys, and don't have this unnatural exuberance to get in and put everything in unless you have the mentality of going, okay, I'm putting this in and I can wait 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Not a big deal. But for the majority of people that get in early or that get in recently, they thought they were going to be the Dogecoin millionaire. And that's the most dangerous part. So right now there is a bullish sentiment. Will this last and will it go on? I said it before, man, I hope Ben's right on this one. I hope we are cruising towards a recession and things will go down, because that's where things actually happen. And apathy is one of those hindrances for investment. So if everything's chopped sideways, but it is what it is. So I see there's some sentiment out there, but who knows if it'll last.
Sure. Yeah. It's it does come in sort of peaks and troughs, doesn't it? Some weeks sentiment seems lower than others. But Ben, is there anything in particular, any particular bullish catalyst that you're looking out for?
Well, I mean, I think sort of going back to the first question, if the Fed can truly achieve a soft landing, where they can bring about the return to 2% inflation year over year, because that's where we get our phases of economic expansion. if they can do that without sort of the risk of inflation reaccelerating, and if they can do it without just sending us into a full-blown recession, let's suppose that the jobs market is just remains strong, and despite their best efforts, they're not able to sort of soften it up, then I suppose that would be something to keep a close eye on as well. And it's important to remember, like from a time-based perspective, the bear markets in crypto tend to last around 1 year, is what we've seen. I mean, and then we have the recovery year. So I guess another thing to sort of look for is a macro, either double bottom or a higher low or something like that. Because if you think back to 2015, it was a double bottom. In 2020, it was just a macro higher low that led us into the next, sustained bull run to new all-time highs. So I would be looking for things like that. And also I would looking at the risk of sounding like a broken record, right? I'd be looking for the dominance of Bitcoin to go up a lot. Because once it goes up in a significant way, then you can really get those movements in the altcoin market that I think a lot of people really crave and desire. If you think back to this last year, and let's just take Ethereum as an example. Ethereum has basically just been between $1,000 and $2,000 for like the last year, and we go through phases where the bulls are right, we go through phases where the bears are right, but in the grand scheme of things, it's just been chopping around in a relatively tight range. If you think back to 2019 and 2020, coming into this bull run, when we were all first making videos, we were all bullish. Ethereum then did a 50x, right? So there's a huge difference, I think, between where we are right now, between sort of squabbling over, will Ethereum go up another 30% or is it going to go down 30%, versus the market conditions that can lead you to a 50x type move. And I don't really think we're at that phase just yet, that the market could support anything like that. So I think the things that we have to be on the lookout for this year are getting inflation back down to 2%, because until they do, the Fed's going to remain very, very hawkish, I think, and just not be willing to go back to QE. So, and then speaking of, that's the other thing we really like is going back to quantitative easing. I mean, it's no secret that crypto has mostly just existed during a period of quantitative easing, and so it would make sense that the next bull run that's going to take us to new all-time highs would likely come after we're back in a period of quantitative easing, not before. That doesn't mean that Bitcoin can't rally, right? It doesn't mean it can go to 25K, it could go to 30K. We could see those sorts of moves, but in order to see 100K or 150K, that sort of stuff, I think you have to get back to a period of quantitative easing and lower interest rates, is my guess. So I think those are the things to keep a lookout for this year, and to just manage expectations, just assume it's going to be a somewhat choppy year.
Yeah. Hey, before we move on, let me ask you guys both this. What's the sentiment like on your channels right now? Because like a couple of months ago, it was pretty bearish. And then when I was talking about bearish things, we were like, oh, okay. But as things have turned a little bit more bullish, have you guys seen that like in the comment section or not? Because I got to tell you, like if I say anything bearish, it seems like everybody's like, Rob's a moron. He's always talking about everything's going to go to the moon and da-da-da. I'm like, how the hell did we get here? That's so fast. Is that the same thing over here or no?
I mean, I think people are happy to call me a moron, whatever my stance. But, I have noticed sort of a general kind of a lifting of the mood in the last couple of weeks, certainly in comments. What's interesting actually in terms of kind of social sentiment and things like that, it's interesting to see that at the moment, because obviously we here on the channel, here on Coin Bureau, we kind of split between we do a lot of crypto stuff, but we also cover a lot of macro stuff as well for obvious reasons. But yeah, when we focus on crypto, it just doesn't get as much interest. We did a video comparing Solana and Aptos last week, because obviously like a lot has happened. A lot's happened with those projects. They've seen a lot of price action. We've had a lot of people asking about them. People are always interested, it seems, in what those two projects are up to, and yeah, the video didn't do particularly well. So I think there is still a lot of apathy out there. Certainly, when we focus on stuff that's not quite so crypto related, it certainly seems to get more popular. But the comments, I think, nothing, just slightly more exuberant, but nothing too much in one direction or the other. What about you, Ben?
Real quick, so about that Aptos and Solana video, I urge everybody to watch that video. I retweeted it, and let me tell you, if you own Solana and Aptos, you better watch that video and read the comment section, because I can tell you why it didn't go over like the greatest with Solana and Aptos users. Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
You're fine. No, I think it's interesting because, in regards to the comment section, it's not as bad, honestly, as it was back in August. So that's at least one example of things sort of slowly turning back around. Is, I think a lot of us were very bearish back in the summer, and Bitcoin was rallying on up back to 25K, and I saw the negative comments about, Ben doesn't know what he's talking about. We're not going to see the capitulation in November. The bear market's over because the top was actually technically in April, and it's already been a year, that sort of stuff. And so you see those comments come out, and then what happens, right? The market goes lower. All those comments sort of just quietly disappear, and then you go put in a new low, and then the minute the market rallies again, those comments just come right back, right? They just come right back. But I will say this: I think one interesting development this time, as opposed to in August, that I do think shows some. I got to be careful; I can't get too ahead of myself, right? But I think that it shows at least some positive development, is that the comments aren't as bad. So I think it shows that there has been at least some, maturation of where we are. I think people are becoming apathetic, and we're likely going to continue to see apathy, which is not. This is normally when everyone's watching, it's not a good thing in terms of price action, at least when you're in a bear market, because everyone's sort of like hoping that it goes higher, and then it eventually just resolves to the downside. I think there is some positive sentiment coming back, but I would be remiss, speaking of Solana specifically, right? I would be remiss if I did not remind people that, it's always this sort of false sense of security. Take the Solana Bitcoin valuation, for instance. Back in January 2022, it was around 40,000 Satoshis, and everyone really liked it, and it was just like the next best thing. And then it goes down, and it puts in a new low, and then it gets back up to 20,000 Satoshis, and everyone's super, everyone loves it again because it's bounced off the most recent low. And then now it's at 10,000 Satoshis, and now everyone loves it again because, again, it's once again bounced off the most recent low to the tune of 50% or something, or maybe a little bit more if you measure it to the wick. But it's a brutal market, especially for the altcoin market. I think we should specify out between Bitcoin and the altcoin market, because what happens is the altcoin market, whether you think the bottom is in for Bitcoin or not, the altcoin market could still. Look at what happened to Cardano in 2020. It put in a new low in 2020 compared to where it was in 2018. Look what happened to XRP. It continued to go down through 2019, even after Bitcoin had bottomed. And so you have to remember, as always, even if you're in camp like bull market to new all-time highs, the altcoin market is still likely, in my opinion, right? And I know I sound like a broken record, but I still think the altcoin market is bleeding against Bitcoin. And so you have to remember that there is some element of the blue chips reign supreme. And just because, your altcoin is up 50, 60, 70, 80% from the most recent low does not change the macro downtrend it's on its Bitcoin pair. I know it makes me the bad guy, but if most people just take an honest look at most altcoin charts, not all of them, they're just simply in macro downtrends against Bitcoin. And I think it always creates this sort of false sense of security that when the altcoin market goes up a little bit, everyone gets excited, until a few months later, and the altcoin market's putting in new lows against Bitcoin.
Ben, you're not the bad guy.
It feels like
it. but man, I gotta, before we move on, I gotta tell you, when we hit those, because I've been DCAing these alts, and when they go up, boy, it feels great. It feels great. But if what feels worse is when it goes down even more. So Like I used to talk about the channel. I go, take some profits. Nobody ever went broke taking profits. If you can do those, not a financial advice, obviously, but it's not how much you make; it's how much you keep, and that's, I think, the bigger issue.
Absolutely. I want to, before we move on to the next question, I want to draw everyone's attention to a very important social metric that I was made aware of last week, and that is the UK taxi driver indicator. So a friend of mine who is very involved in the crypto space has been over back in the UK recently, and she messaged me recently to say that every taxi driver she's spoken to in the last few weeks since she's been back is into crypto.
Oh no.
So, and generally, apparently, sentiment among UK taxi drivers is generally pretty high. So make of that what you will. We could be on the cusp of liftoff for all we know. It's a tough time for sentiment, I think, and as you guys have said, apathy is pretty strong right now. But for those of you who are still watching, for those of you who are paying attention at times like this, that's a huge advantage for you, because most people have kind of wandered off to look at something else, which is something that will pay off for those of us still in the game later on down the line.
Yeah, gotta agree on that one.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on then. Let's. I want to talk about. I want to kind of stay with this sort of bullish theme, and for now. And so we've all got skeptical friends, relatives. Well, maybe not friends anymore, but skeptical people that we know, who don't believe that crypto is anything but a force for evil or whatever. So if there was one particular reason that either of you had to give to a skeptical friend or relative about why crypto is here to stay, why crypto is not just going to go away, then what would that reason be? Rob, do you want to lead us off?
This is tough. This was a tough question. Just to say, like, if you just had to say like one particular thing, it's difficult. But I would just say like this. I would just say, well, just look who's here right now. Look who's in the crypto space, because everybody has their idea of what crypto is and how big it'll be and why it will thrive or whatnot. But we talked about this yesterday, which was if I'm talking to most of my friends, they're mostly investors. And I would just say, look who's here right now. And we talked about this yesterday about the institutions that are actually in the crypto space right now, like the Fidelities, the BlackRock, NASDAQ Digital Assets, BNY Mellon, Charles Schwab, Citadel, JP Morgan. And what I would say is like this, like, look, these, and I hate to use the term smart money. I like to use the term big money. These big money players, they don't get into these industries because they're there to fail. They get into them usually at a pretty good time, and they do that so they can succeed. They're not here. They don't have loser tattooed on their foreheads. So when you take a look at who's here, just take a look at, the big institutions that are there. And then, of course, if we took a look at like all the different, the money that's sloshing around, crypto is only $1 trillion. The entire derivative space is over 600 trillion. Real estate is 280 trillion. And the entire stock market globally is over 100 trillion. So to me, I just take a look at that and go, just see who's here. And that would be my one case if I just had to stick with the one thing.
Of course, there's so many to name, aren't there? Ben, what about you?
Yeah, it's hard to come up with just one thing, but maybe I would, because there's a lot of things we could point to, but maybe I would say I think it's fairly obvious that we're just heading towards a more digital world in general, and I think cryptocurrency is just going to play an integral role in that, just in a more decentralized digital world, where we can sort of cut out the middleman as much as we can, and I think a lot of people would actually like to get on board with those ideas, just sort of cutting out some of the inefficiencies in financial markets that exist today, and just recognizing that cryptocurrency can actually help solve a lot of those issues. I mean, again, and the digital world is also inclusive of sort of the development of the metaverse, which I think we're still a ways away from truly living in this, like, sort of this metaverse type thing, and probably be something my kids are more interested than I am, to be completely honest. But I think like it's fairly obvious that we are heading towards a more digital world, and I think cryptocurrency is going to just simply be an integral part of that digital world.
Absolutely. And yeah, going back, taking a lead from what both of you said, really, Rob, I think absolutely it's so much for me. Whenever I sort of feel a bit down about crypto, I think of all the people in this space, all the people kind of building these amazing things. I mean, Vitalik springs to mind. You've got these amazingly clever people building these incredible projects that really so few people understand. And one of the things that's really struck me about from kind of meeting people in the crypto community, I've been really heartened by the number of people I've spoken to who've kind of left mainstream jobs. I've spoken to so many people who've worked in finance and law and creative industries and things like that, who've discovered crypto. And of course, a lot of people in those industries will just dabble. They might have a small or large portfolio of allocation to crypto, and that would be it. But so many people seem to have been just inspired to come across and bring their skills to the space. And I think there has been a really positive shift in skills, people bringing these, if you like, traditional job skills into crypto. And for me, that's been such a great thing to see. It's not, and it really shows there's almost a kind of brain drain, I think, towards crypto in a way, which makes me feel incredibly positive about the whole space. And also, Ben, touching on what you were talking about as well, the utility of it, the how much of a fundamental role it's going to play in our lives. I mean, it's almost like before you get, as you say, more and more people are becoming are living online for longer and longer, and we are moving towards this hyper digitized world. And before we get there, we have to get certain things right. We can't just jump into this brave new world without having things like money sorted. How do you transfer value in this world? And I think you have to get those things right before we can start dreaming of anything kind of more science fiction or anything like that. So I find it really cheering that crypto has come along and started work on that huge problem to get that right. And then I think there's also the sense of just imagine, I guess if you've got someone skeptical, if you're talking to a skeptic, just ask them to try and do something like transfer money from one country to another and see how archaic, see how outdated and expensive and slow that system is. And then say, look, you could try sending $100 from the US to Pakistan, and it might take days. And you can be absolutely certain of one thing, that $100 will not arrive in Pakistan. It will be minus hefty fees, whenever that might be. And then you can show them just how quickly and cheaply you can do it with crypto. And when I was speaking to someone else about this recently, they said, well, yeah, and also try doing a large amount. It's one thing to try and send $100 or something, but if you're trying to send a large amount of money across a border for whatever reason, then it only becomes more difficult. And yet we now have this system where we can do it seamlessly, quickly, and cheaply.
Yeah. But you know what? Just adding to the points of what you guys talked about is, like, when I talk to people who are skeptics here in the States, or I mean, you probably come across this too. First world countries, they're like, why do I need this? Because for dollars or for euros, I can just ship them around on whatever app I have, or I can use it. It's not a big deal. And one of my problems is I always see things through the lens of an American. So when I hear about like Bitcoin and being a store of value and things like, I'm like, is it really? Is it really? But then when I start to think about it and the different countries, like we talked about the third world country, we talk about the transmitter license and all those things, but it does become very difficult, and especially the ones that are unbanked. But another thing is that I think people don't realize what it could do, because before the internet, I'm old enough to remember this, before the internet, people would actually write these things called letters, and they would put them in envelopes and they would ship them off. And yeah, it was crazy. And they would do all these things, and they thought that was just the normal thing, no big deal. And they're like, why? And this is the truth. Why would I need an email? I can just write an email. It takes a little bit longer. The stamp's 29 cents, but whatever. But, it's my real letter. And then as we started to get into email, and we actually went from Web 1 to Web 2, and we could do those things, people were like, oh, this is how it is. So the same thing, like you talked about, eliminating the middleman. If you go and do anything with your mortgage, when you sit down and sign for a house, look at all the fees that go along with that. When you go to the DMV and you have to register with things with the county, look at all the fees that are associated with that. Just in that part alone, if you could eliminate those things, people don't realize what it is because it's not here yet. But once they get it, like, wow, it's cheaper, that's pretty good, then they'll get it.
Yeah. It's and that kind of first world point of view, isn't it? And you only need to talk to someone from somewhere like Argentina, where I gather, by the way, did you guys see this story? Apparently, bank vaults in Argentina are running out of space to store all these banknotes, because they're having to print so much money because of inflation.
Yeah,
and
that's crazy.
Yeah, you speak to people from these countries, and they're using it. A friend of mine was in Argentina recently, and he was saying everyone was just using crypto. And again, that's something that gets me, so excited about it. It is being used. It's easy. It's so easy to forget in countries like the US or the UK or these other places. It's so easy to forget that actually people are relying on it. It's not just speculative.
Yeah, I gotta agree. But I can't see it because I'm here in the States. But if I go across, which is why I like to travel for the Coin Bureau live event, so I get to see other countries.
Absolutely. Okay, I want to change direction now. I want to go a bit more left field, I think. So I don't know. This is a version on the old dinner party game. So you're hosting a dinner party to which an invited audience of crypto personalities are going to turn up. So obviously we assume that Satoshi gets an invite, an automatic invite. He hasn't yet. They haven't yet RSVP'd, but we're keeping our fingers crossed. So who would be the five people that you would have, the 5 crypto guests to the ultimate crypto dinner party? Ben, do you want to go first?
Sure. It's funny too, because we of course don't know who Satoshi is, so you always run the risk of saying someone who is Satoshi, right? Even though he's probably not. But I would say one of the ones that was around really early on in the early days, Adam Back. I think he'd be really interesting to have there. To kind of talk about him. He's the inventor of Hashcash. Vitalik Buterin. It'd be hard not to have him there because he's behind Ethereum, and Ethereum is just performed enormously well given all things considered, right? At least so far. And I think that Ethereum, to a large extent, is the backbone of the altcoin market. And imagine if Ethereum did not exist. I feel like crypto would look so much different, than it does.
Yeah.
And so I think you'd have to have Vitalik there. I also think some of the early proponents of Bitcoin, like Andreas Antonopoulos. There's all those famous. And it's not like he's making a ton of videos or that sort of stuff, but he's very pro Bitcoin, and he's been around Bitcoin. And you guys remember there's a video or a picture of him giving a presentation, I think, and there's no one there, and this is on Bitcoin many years ago when essentially no one really cared about it. And so these are the people that I really want to meet, because they had a vision about it long before a lot of other people did. And I think back to Vitalik. To create Ethereum back in 2015, as young as he was, and to really get fully behind that as young as he was. It just really shows the vision that that these people had way before everyone else had the same vision. And then maybe I would, and this is a very, very different one, but I think it would be interesting to have CZ there, because I mean, Binance, again, I will say this again, that the centralized platforms, you don't want to store your crypto there, and you just can't trust anything. But with that said, I mean, Binance controls, I think, a majority of the spot volume of crypto.
Yeah.
And I mean, he has got to have so much knowledge about the cryptoverse. I mean, he can see everything. He can see so much of the flows of the money, where it's going. He's also behind of probably a lot of things being developed, that could potentially sort of rear their heads in the next bull run. I think he'd be interesting to have there. And then maybe someone like, I don't know, maybe like Jack Dorsey, maybe like Michael Saylor, something like that. Someone who's, I mean, Saylor's a lot newer to the crypto scene, but I mean, it's hard to imagine the last bull market without Saylor there, right? It was just such a popular narrative, and so I think it'd be great to sort of meet all these people, and I try to give very different examples. Someone from really early on, some for Bitcoin, a couple of those people. You have Vitalik for Ethereum. Then you have someone who joined, only a few years ago, but has created sort of like this empire in the cryptoverse. And then maybe someone who's a little bit more recent, but has still had a lot of impact. And I know a lot of people have given Saylor a hard time for some of the things he's, some of the buys and stuff. But I mean, the truth is a lot of people did that kind of stuff, right? You buy when it's high, and then you watch it come back down, and everyone kind of laughs at you and points at you and makes fun of you. But I sincerely hope that in the end he gets the last laugh. This is my hope. There's of course a lot of people that thinks it won't happen, but I hope that he actually gets the last laugh on this, and that Bitcoin sort of proves the critics wrong. And I know I've been very somewhat pessimistic about things, but as we get further out, I hope he gets the last laugh on Bitcoin, and Bitcoin goes to new highs. And so I think having all these people would be quite an eclectic group of people to have at a dinner party to just get their different perspectives on Bitcoin and the cryptoverse in general.
That's pretty good. Past and present.
And you'd imagine as well that they would that's the sort of grouping. Once they get started, you can just kind of sit back and wallow in this conversation, in this back and forth from these people who, especially in the case of people like Vitalik and CZ, who've created these things. And as you say, I mean, their insights into what happens, behind the scenes, what's being worked on. This idea that, I mean, it's this idea, isn't it, that the with technology that's out there at the moment, that's always just the tip of the iceberg. I remember someone saying this about ChatGPT just recently. Okay, we've got this amazing tool out there, but what about the stuff that they're holding back? What about the stuff that we don't know about? And I feel people like CZ and Vitalik would probably have, in crypto terms, would probably have some pretty good insights into what that sort of stuff is. So you just have to make sure that. Sorry,
I was just gonna say, I imagine some of the guests might have strong disagreements with each other about certain things. It'd be fun to hear them talk.
Vitalik and back. Oh yeah, that'd be a good one.
Yeah,
good back and forth.
That would be that you'd want front row seats to that, wouldn't you? So there's a name coming up in the comments quite a lot, who I think I'll leave you guys to see if you can guess that. I'll maybe see whether Rob mentions this name, but a particular name coming up who I think would be excellent for that sort of to get the argument going. But Rob, who would you have? Who would be round your table?
Could I go last on this one? Because no one's going to like my answer. I just want to hear yours first.
Sure. Well, okay. I was kind of thinking along the same lines as Ben. I initially thought it would be good to get quite an eclectic mix. People from different ecosystems, if you like, the Bitcoin maxis and maybe ETH maxis, people like that, people with as many sort of different points of view as possible. And then I thought, well, I mean, you kind of get that on crypto Twitter every single day. So what I'd be really fascinated to have, I think I'd go really old school. I'd like to get some original cypherpunks, and people who were there right at the beginning. And I should have said as well, you can have anyone living or dead. But so which allows me to have. So my first would be Hal Finney. Obviously,
I didn't think that people that were no longer alive were part of the question. So I would have said,
right.
I would have said Finney too.
Okay, we're all agreed on Hal Finney. I'd love to have Wei Dai, also David Chaum, original cypherpunk, the guy who came up with DigiCash, and I think was a huge inspiration to Satoshi himself. So Wei Dai, David Chaum, Hal Finney. I'd also like to go for Nick Szabo. Obviously, a lot of people's candidate for Satoshi. He's denied it, and I mean, it's all the more fascinating that you don't really hear very much from Nick Szabo these days, which is a shame, considering what a huge influence he's had on all of crypto, on Bitcoin and crypto as a result, and also on a sort of similar. In a sort of similar term, Gavin Andresen as well, who I think perhaps more than anyone was, well, maybe not everyone, but was one of the most sort of influential people, one of the first people to discover Bitcoin and start talking about it and put it out there in the world. And I think what he did in order to get Bitcoin noticed and in order to educate people about Bitcoin was sort of very few people can claim to have made such a contribution. And what I think is really interesting is that obviously with Hal Finney sadly passed away, but it seems that these kind of original guys, almost the sort of patron saints of Bitcoin, have now very much sort of faded into the background. You don't hear very much from them. They're not particularly active in the community, although people like David Chaum are still about. In fact, I met David Chaum at the beginning of this week. I was at a dinner where he was, and so, but they're not. It seems like other people have kind of taken up the mantle, and Michael Saylor's a very good example there. Whereas, and obviously there are kind of people have had different views about especially Bitcoin. Some of the early Bitcoiners are kind of almost feel like persona non grata because they've expressed views. Well, in people like Roger Vere's case, he went sort of down the Bitcoin Cash rabbit hole, didn't he? So some of these sort of really real OGs have, for one reason or another, faded into the background. And I'd love to hear them. I'd love to hear people like that talk amongst themselves, but also get their take on what they make of the industry now. I mean, do they feel that it's grown to something that they could never have imagined? Are they happy about that? Do they feel that it's lost its way? Are they all Bitcoin maxis to the last, or do they love things like Ethereum and all these other altcoins? I think that would be absolutely fascinating to get those to get those sorts of views.
Yeah, and you know what? It's almost like bringing the founding fathers from America back to the living and just asking them. So when we talk about freedom of speech in the Constitution, is it okay for us to burn flags and to? I mean, I'm not going to go on this rabbit hole, but it's just interesting to get them here and go, okay, you wrote the white paper, Satoshi Nakamoto, which is probably Hal Finney, who knows? Do you still believe it is a peer-to-peer transaction, or it's a store of value, or it is a hedge against inflation? What is it that you wrote this for? And this is what we think it is. And then to have like Ben talked about Adam Back coming in and go, no, we made it this, and Vitalik Buterin's like, no, we do this other way with smart contracts. That will be fascinating, I think, to get the perspective of where we should be and what they originally meant it to be. So
yeah, it would, and just what do they? What do they think of it? Is this what I guess that would be the question you would ask Satoshi, wouldn't it? It's like, what do you think? Could you ever have imagined that it would get to this? So Rob, I mean, I'm dying to hear your picks on this. The picks that apparently no one's going to like.
No one's gonna like this, but here it is. So like, I knew you guys were gonna say some of those chaps, you know, who you're gonna bring in, which would be fascinating. So you'd probably do a video about it, or we talk about it, like, oh, this is what they said. So I'm like, great, that's awesome. I'd love to hear about this. This is who I would want. Well, of course, we got 5 people. So I want, number 1, Alex Mashinsky. I want Do Kwon. I want the 2 guys from 3 Arrows Capital. I don't know I forgot their names. And I want Sam Bankman-Fried. And if I could have a 6th person as like the waiter, I want Gary Gensler. So what I want to do is I want to bring these guys and sit them down and just say, okay, you said that this person screwed you over, and you said that this was because of this, and you said that. So let's all hash it out and tell me the reality. It would be a knockdown, drag-out fight, and it would be a lot of people going back and forth. But I could get the real story behind the story, not the BS that they tell us, you know, through their lawyers. That would be awesome. So that's who I'd want to invite, those 5 people, and then Gary could be like, "Would you like more water, sir?" And then go from there.
Yours would, if it were televised, yours would definitely get the most views.
Oh yeah.
I think, yeah, I don't think there's a single person in crypto who would want to miss that show. Yeah,
Pay-per-view, for sure.
We need to make that happen. The doors are locked. They're not allowed to leave until we have some answers.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall. Wow. Well, thanks, guys. Yes, Rob. Yeah, I mean, yeah, some unpopular choices, but yeah, I think taken as a whole, that's a great direction to go in, because yeah, we need answers from them. As much as it would be great to hear the opinions of the OGs on the space now. It's yeah, we also need to hear some honesty from some of the people who've kind of stepped into their shoes, because they've really messed it up, these guys.
Yes,
yeah,
Rob, it's funny because if you had given those 5 people a year ago at this time, the reception to that would have been completely different.
You know what? That is the perfect segment, because like what we're talking about, you know, how like Ben's like, I don't want to be the bad guy, but it tempers expectations, because you never know what's going to happen in the future. The people that were heroes a year ago are now the villains of the play. Isn't that amazing? So be careful out there.
That's why
right.
you have to think about, okay, well, what is the risk of at any given time? Because you don't know what could happen, right? Anything could happen, right? There's just no way to know. And think back then, I mean, I think a lot of us thought that the house of cards was going to fall down to some extent, but I don't think, you know, I certainly did not think that it was going to be the extent that it was, in terms of exactly who went down and how badly and how spectacular as well. True.
Very, very true.
Yeah, if you'd been told a year ago, right, you have to pick out 5 of crypto's future villains in a year's time. I think anyone who managed to pick all of those would have been lucky at best. But yeah, it's extraordinary how what's unfolded in the space of a year. And I know I've said this many times, but it really has been the longest year I can remember. Yes, certainly in crypto, but just, you know, obviously I spend my entire life in crypto now, but gosh, it certainly has been a long year. Anyway, guys, we're almost at time, but I'm just looking through a few of the questions that people have submitted. There's a particularly burning question here, and I think I can tell we might get different answers on this. But FPL wannabe is that, do we all need to grow beards for NFA? Which
yes, Ben, it's time.
Yeah,
I'm not as lucky as you two. If I tried, it would probably look really bad.
That's what we all want to see, Ben. We can't rest until we see what the Ben Cowan beard like. Believe me, there were lots of beard comments, unfortunately, which is my fault, seeing as I've broken one out in the last couple of weeks. By the way, the person whose name kept coming up in the comments as a guest to the crypto dinner party was Charles Hoskinson.
Ah, yeah.
I think he was by far the most popular pick, sort of among the comments in general. And I think obviously a lot of Cardano fans, obviously. But I think what I love about Charles is that he's so, he's so outspoken. He's kind of prickly, isn't he? But I mean, he's so outspoken but also passionate. And I think he would make a great guest, I think.
Great. Adam Beck, Charles Hoskinson, and Vitalik Buterin in one place. Yeah, I'd pay money to watch that.
Yeah, that would be spicy, wouldn't it? Okay, let's just see if someone's saying I would invite all three of you guys, which is very very kind of them. I think that's Green Day Profits. I think I think you're missing a trip, Green Day Profits. Stick to NFA Live. Yeah. Okay, and here is one final thing to end on, guys. Lolo58. Will regulations come before the next bull market, or will it be the top of the next bull market? And I guess really that question is, do we need regulations in order to see a bull market, or vice versa, or can we get to a bull market without them? Rob, what do you think?
I don't think we need regulation. We already had a couple before, worked out just fine. But to get to really shoot it off, it depends on the regulation. Like, I just saw a tweet from the CIO of Coinbase talking about how the SEC is looking to do away with staking for citizens of the United States. And that's just a rumor, so don't quote me on that one. So, like, do we need it? I don't think we need it, but it depends on like what it can actually do. If they just give us clarity, then sure. But if they say, okay, you can't use any banks into centralized exchanges, now we got more problems. That's what I see.
Yeah,
I would say probably both. I mean, I don't think regulation is just going to be this one and done thing, right? It's probably going to be something that is constantly evolving, and maybe the first time they try to implement it, they don't get it right, and then they fix it later on and they make tweaks to it. And it probably also depends on what you mean by bull market. Like if Bitcoin goes to 30K and then drops back down to 20K, do you consider that a bull market from 15K to 30K, like a 2x move? Or are you talking about a new all-time high? I mean, I do think we will have regulation, a lot more regulation by the time we hit a new all-time high. But if your definition of a bull market is just maybe 2x off the lows, then maybe not. But I think again it'll just be an ongoing development in the cryptoverse.
Yeah.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so. Yeah, and I think it needs to be an ongoing process, because I think it's a lot to ask of regulators in whichever jurisdiction you're talking about to get it right straight off the bat. And I think as long as it is an evolutionary process, as long as regulations of some sort do come in, some of them will be good, some of them will be not so good. But as long as that process is open and it can evolve, and we can change the ones that don't help move the industry forward, that don't encourage innovation, things like that, then it'll be a long drawn out process, but hopefully it will go in the right direction.
Well, in crypto itself
anyway
too. So
what was that, Ben? Sorry.
I was just saying, well, crypto itself is evolving constantly as well. Like, imagine trying to regulate the upcoming the NFT market of 2021. Like, you couldn't have really regulated that well back in 2016 or something, because you just wouldn't have known. So it's also the cryptoverse will constantly change, and there'll be regulations to sort of match what new developments occur too.
That's a good point, because I mean, look at how much utility, because back in 2014, 15, there was no real utility outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum when it got created. But now we see more utility coming in, and that wouldn't be an investment contract, which would be one of the prongs of the Howey test. So you're right. Yeah, I'm going to steal that one. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. On that note, thank you both, guys. That is, I think we're just about out of time there. But thanks for joining today. To everyone watching, I cannot stress enough how important it is that you follow Rob and Ben. Rob is Digital Asset News on YouTube. Ben is at Into the Cryptoverse on YouTube. Follow them both on Twitter as well, and they both have excellent resources over on their channels. So do check them all out. We will be back next week at the same time. I think at the same time, slightly different place. Is it who's hosting next week?
I'll be back on my channel. Yeah, it should be on my channel next Thursday.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Ben. And we will be back next week with NFA Live episode 7 on Ben's channel, Into the Cryptoverse. We will see you all then. Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
See you, everyone.